I'll start with the name. Hello. Product owner and product discovery. Okay, so I've been doing it a while. I've been with Open a few years. And before I was at Open, I was the only web developer in like an IT company. So it was kind of like a value add to IT services. It wasn't the main focus. And then at Open, everything is Drupal. So since then, it's kind of accelerated both my technical knowledge, but also how to even work with projects like this. The scale tends to be bigger, and there's a formal process. So I started at Open as a developer, and after a few months, transitioned into being what we had at that time called a tech lead. So we have two independent teams, and within them we have certain roles, project manager, back then tech lead, and then suite of developers. And the developers ranged from back-end, front-end, generalist, but generally there were silos with a little bit of knowledge transfer or pair programming where it made sense. And we had adopted certain tenets of Agile, but it was never really formal. And then company-wide, we made a decision to fully adopt Agile. We all kind of agreed with the tenets, but it's one thing to agree with it and introduce things like, oh, let's do a Scrum every morning, but then not follow the rest of it. So we committed, management-wise, we all got certified as Scrum Masters and Product Owners, and that kind of opened my eyes to how to work a little bit differently in leading a team, which I'll go through that transition. And now my title is Product Owner, and in a year it might be something else, but it's all been trending towards achieving the same outcome, which is, can we build the thing the client actually wants to achieve their goals within time and budget? And obviously, whatever we're building, can we build it to the best of our abilities? And I think all the different titles are answers to meeting this outcome, and I think now we're getting closer and closer with the product owner role. So in terms of what we'll be doing or going through today, I just want to start with going over a little bit about Agile framework. I assume most people know parts of it, heard of it, maybe you know it in depth, but I'll go over it. Because sometimes there's a little bit of room for interpretation, so I want to go through kind of our understanding at Open and the team structure, then go into the product owner role and what it actually means, what the title means for us at Open, and the responsibility at discovery sessions. Then I'll actually walk through discoveries I've done recently and some of the flows through discovery to pull out specific information. So I'll show actual examples of things I've ended up with. And then from there, now we've done discovery, how do we build a website? How do you take some discovery notes and then go back to a dev team and say, now we need a Drupal site? Because there is a gap there in terms of the information I have and the dev team will get. And then I'm just going to end with a few resources that I use to kind of get me up to speed and learning the different techniques. One main thing is that I've realized, because we have more than one product owner at Open, and I've worked with other ones, there's a part of it that's personality traits, where you have to build connections and relationships with clients to be able to pull out appropriate information that will lend itself to project success. So I have some techniques I use, some tricks I'll call it, but a lot of it is trial and error and figuring out what works best for you, but then what clients also respond to. Not everyone will respond to the same prioritization game. So it's a lot of taking cues from your clients to see, how am I going to pull this information out and kind of guide the conversation. Okay, so what is a product owner? It has other titles. There's things like product designer, which are a bit more UX focused. But in short, the product owner is the client's ambassador at Open. So my job is to act on the client's behalf with our dev team, with our production team, to make sure their best interests are respected throughout the process. And their best interests come from a variety of things, which I'll get into. But in short, that is what it is, that once we step away from the client, the conversations continue internally. And if the team needs any clarification, I represent the client and their needs, not so much Open, this is going to save us time, this is easier to do. Maybe the client will value that, and that's the kind of approach I would take, but it's really to put myself in the client's shoes and say, what would they want, based on all the discovery sessions. And a big part of learning what a client wants is really to understand their business. And to understand their business from the sense of, how do they make money? Typically, success is based on money. There's not for-profit organizations where it might be outreach, it might be awareness. To simplify things, it is how do we increase revenue? 9 times out of 10, that's generally, even if it's 3 steps away from that, generally how can we get more of what we have to keep us going? So you have to understand their business, how it works, and what's going to contribute to that revenue or success, let's call it. And then what's getting in the way of it? Not just with the project we have with the website, but in general, what's getting in the way of the revenue going up or down? And from that, you have to learn what's going to bring them business value. And business value is something I'm going to mention quite a bit, because a lot of the decisions we make internally is around, is this thing we're building going to bring business value? Based on what we've already agreed is going to bring business value. And I'll give specific examples. It's a bit abstract right now. But even when we get down to, we know what we're building, we can build it 3 ways. Which one's going to bring the most value? And part of that may be they're going to maintain it themselves. So let's not hard code everything. Let's try to use as much UI as we can. It may take us a little bit longer, but that's going to enable them to be self-sufficient. And they've already recognized something like our publishers aren't that hands-on or aren't that familiar with Drupal. So then I look at it as, well, business value would be that you don't have to hire Drupal experts to maintain your site. We'll take a little bit of time, make it easier for them. But throughout all of it, it's a conversation. No decisions made in a vacuum. So in terms of team roles, I've kind of mentioned really high level, but our teams are about 5 to 7 people. 2 of them are POs, so project owners, so my role, and then what we have is a project manager. And the project manager is, in different organizations, can be a team lead, can be a combination of a team lead or a scrum master, but it's generally the one person whose focus is the team. And then my role is really the product and the client. And then we have our dev team. And I mentioned already we had devs before. There was a little bit of knowledge sharing, but since we moved to Agile, we do a lot more pair programming. We've tried to break down the silos of, I'm a back-end guy strictly, that's all I'm ever going to do, and I'm front-end only, I'm only going to do front-end. We definitely agree that people should have specializations, but for the health of the team, we have a threshold that everyone has to meet, so that if I see a task on our board that's front-end, I should be capable of doing it. If I'm not capable of doing it, I should be capable of working with another team member to do it. It's really made life great for the devs. There's always a little bit of pushback of, well, I'm never going to do front end. You kind of have to. We don't always have the luxury of everything on our board that we use for tasks to be front end or back end. So we're going to be in situations where you're going to have to be able to do things that aren't maybe your primary specialization. So what we've come up with is this general level of knowledge or skill everyone has. So you can do site building, you can do some basic dev, some basic front end, and then we have specializations of, okay, that's definitely our database guy, or she's definitely our front end. So when it is something at the extremes, we do have people who can do it or guide the rest of the team. But the goal is that everyone has a toolbox, a similar toolbox. So like I said, there's sometimes pushback when you have conversations with people who've been doing something for a while and you tell them, now you're going to have to learn this. But that is a necessity of working in this kind of environment. And generally, we've had a lot of success with it. Even when there's been apprehension, once you get into the flow, you actually see, you know what, it's not a bad thing to try something else when I don't have the pressure of, you have 2 hours to do it, but I've never done it. Too bad you have to do it. It's different. The team's going to support you. This is a new thing to you. Let's do it. Let's learn it, and next time you need less and less support. So PO definition I've gone through, and I've already mentioned one big thing, and it's going to be a theme throughout here, that throughout the process, I build a really strong relationship with our clients because it's all built on trust, and them trusting that I understand their needs, because I'm going to be recommending decisions. And if they know that I don't know how their business operates, my recommendations aren't going to mean much. And this is something that's important because as a tech lead, what would happen is I'd go into the room, hear kind of pain points, success factors, go back to my desk, create a massive spreadsheet, requirement spreadsheet, give it to the dev team saying, build these content types, build these views. But I never really understood, are these actually going to help? They've said we need this kind of content type, but why do you need it? What is it supposed to do? It was more top down, and then the dev team would take it and build to a spec, and it was never exactly what the client wanted. There was things missing, or when you run KPIs after, how do we even judge if it's a success? We never even asked, once you launch, how do you know if this is successful? If the publisher is saying, yeah, this is a bit better, I can embed YouTube easier, or our revenue went up, or the thing we wanted to happen actually happened. And those were conversations we didn't tend to have, and now those conversations drive our development. So in terms of discovery, there's a lot of work you do before discovery. As I said, as a tech lead, I do a little bit, read the contract, go on the site, and then go into the room and kind of be an open book, hear from the different stakeholders, what do you need, what are the problems, okay, that's a content type, that's a taxonomy, and then go off and build it. Now I do a lot more beforehand. Because I have to speak from more of a place of expertise, I do a lot more research ahead of time. So whatever industry it is, I try to learn something about it. I don't have to be an expert in car sales, but I should know some of the success factors and challenges, some of the key KPIs before I go into the room to be able to speak the language. In terms of pre-discovery, here's some of the things I do. Read the proposals front to back, any RFPs or RFQs, because that's the last thing the client knows of the project before I came into the room. And there's nothing worse than going in a room and asking a question and they ask, did you read the appendices? We have it all detailed there. And you go, oh, do you mind telling me again your pain points? So there's a lot of prep I do in that case. I do deep dives, obviously, into their current site so that when they say, you know, on this page, it's static, I can agree, and yeah, I did see that actually, and I did notice this, and I did notice that. And you can get past that kind of beginning phase a lot quicker and get to the meat and bones of it. I run things like SEO Moz or any tool to get some feedback that way. In some cases, SEO is a big thing on their mind. In some cases, it's not. But coming from a place of being an expert, I want to bring value to the client. Hey, I don't know if you knew this, but your ranking's pretty low because of these things. And usually the things I do, like Wave is another one for accessibility. I know most of our clients are bound by AOTA or some sort of accessibility standard. So I kind of do that all ahead of time. So when we're in the room and they talk about accessibility, I can actually report back immediately, yeah, this is what we know already. Sometimes we have delivery pushback. We had this recently in a proposal meeting where the client asked, why do you guys have discovery in your proposal? We've done discovery for the last year. We know exactly what we want. Why are you guys doing this again? And we've had this a number of times. And that comes from a place of, we've done all this work, why are you charging us for this work? And we know what we want, just build what we want, which is logical. And originally as a tech lead, I kind of went, okay, let me see what you want, let's build it. But I've realized that leaves so many assumptions. Big things I have for that whenever I'm asked is, we can't build from a requirement stock. And I know we can't because we tried it. And if I'm telling you this method is going to fail, then usually that's enough indication to say fine, but at least read it so when you come into the room you have some context. But when you tell someone that this way of doing it's going to fail, and I know from experience it's going to fail, that helps. The other part is, like I said, assumptions. Me reading a document is very different than having a conversation and being able to poke and prod and pull out information that's not in there. There's quite a bit too where we will ask questions they haven't, maybe. Some of the questions we're asking, maybe it's new stakeholders. They usually start these documents a year before I'm ever even in the room, and there's usually turnover. Maybe the champion of that document isn't even in the room. So I'll ask questions they didn't. I'll talk to people who are now responsible for the project who weren't part of that process. And then a year is a long time for things to change. Businesses evolve, the requirements should evolve as well. So usually when I bring up all these reasons, I can get, okay, fine, let's do discovery, but let's make it efficient. So in terms of making it efficient, that's where all the product pre-discovery comes in. Try to learn as much as I can so I can go in prepared and prove, we need this, I've done my homework, but now we're going to get extras out of it. And what I do is I set up a really clear agenda to prove that we're structured. We're not just coming in there to talk to you. You've done this internally. We actually have goals in mind. And this is what a sample agenda looks like. And I'll go through each one of these and show you examples of what I actually come out with. So the agenda is usually to come up with a shared vision. A lot of times these documents will already have, like, this is from our annual report, the view or the perspective for this project, or the vision for this project. But corporate reports don't really lend themselves well to actually building something. It's more of a really overarching organizational goal, not something specific to the thing we're building. So while they may say, well, we already have a vision, I'll walk you through how I showed that you kind of didn't, and we need something more specific. We identify who the key users are. Usually you want to make everyone happy, but you can't. So let's focus it to key people, and we identify how we know these are key people based on KPIs that I'll get into too. The problems that affect these key people, and this is where we're starting to transition into something tangible that we're going to build. Usually, with the tech lead role, I would start with something tangible, like I said, content types, taxonomies. But I've already made all sorts of assumptions at that point. In this case, I start with the problem and then see the technical part that fixes that problem, the actual thing we're building to fix the problem, rather than this technical thing we're building, hopefully it solves these problems. From the problems, we create features, and this is where now we're getting tangible. This is what they've been waiting for. When are we talking about search? When are we talking about our news section? This is when we start talking about it. But by this point, we have a really straight connection to their vision, their KPIs, their users. So when we come down to the features, with confidence, we can say, yes, you need this thing, or no, now we can see it doesn't really line up with what you've told us. Even though in your contract you said we need these 8 things, we can see you only need these 3, plus these other 2 that we just learned about. And one thing I've learned, it's taken me a while, contracts are malleable. I used to see things in there with allocations. Okay, I guess we have to build this content type because it's in there and they're signed off on it. But that doesn't always mean success. And I've learned that showing through this process, it's really easy to go back to our clients and say, this thing in the contract, we're not doing it right. And we put it in writing. So when it comes down to it and they have to sign off, there's never a conversation of where's our whatever carousel, you know. Prioritization is a big part of this we're going to go through, but for features and actually building something, we prioritize them to be able to start our sprints and actually start work. We leave discovery with a mountain of information somewhat organized. It's almost a difficult transition to go from this information to specific sprints, and what do we build first? How do we even start? The client is part of this, and it's part of the discovery. And risk-wise, we want to leave discovery identifying or starting to identify a list of potential risks from third-party integrations. Like we have a CRM that feeds news. That's really important to know before we start to build it. Or we have custom tables where this comes from. Or we have to integrate with this thing or that thing. With design, who's even designing this thing? If it's not us, who is it? They have to be in the room for these discovery sessions. You don't want to have the same conversation over and over. You don't. We all should be under the same framework of what we know about the project. I shouldn't have my own discovery. Design should have their own discovery. Lego pieces will not line up. That always happens. So who's doing design? What are they doing in the design process? Who's doing IA? Who's doing all this kind of these kind of things that kind of fall between the cracks of, well, someone's doing graphic design, someone's doing Drupal site building. Well, where does content go? What does the top lab look like? These are the kind of things that are missed. So these are the kind of things I want to leave discovery with, having concrete answers to who's doing what. Like I said, the worst thing is a disappointed client. Because on our team, and I'm sure your teams, everyone's trying as hard as they can. Everyone is busting their butts to build the best thing. And if project fails because no one asked where's the IA, that's a terrible thing after you spent months building something. And then migration is another super important one. How is the content coming over? It's going to be a factor in our prioritization of what content type or what thing we build first. If you have to manually copy and paste 1,000 pages, we probably shouldn't wait till the end to build that thing. Let's give you a head start so when you launch, your content is there. So all these factors go into prioritization. So vision. Just a few key things about vision and why it's useful, besides just being kind of like a marketing thing. The vision defines the motivation for the project, and that's usually where some KPIs come up. So our signups are going down, people can't access it on mobile, we're not getting registrations, our ticket sales are going down because it's too hard to do. So I'm starting to already pick up on really key things we have to deliver on for them to think it's a success. Looking beyond, so this is the part where we're not only thinking about the website, but overall business strategy. How does this fit in? Because this might solve other problems you don't know of. Or you may be thinking this is going to solve a problem that's impossible for this website to solve. So we need to actually look at the whole picture so that the project is judged accordingly. The direction, to me, this is the biggest one in discovery sessions. So identifying a vision is our true north, is our point that we're going to point to. Anytime we have a discussion and it's starting to go off the rails, I can go, does this help our vision? Is this even related? No, I guess not. And then we're back into our conversation. And by agreeing on it, by it being shared by everyone in the room, it's so easy to guide that conversation and ground it in. I don't know if we need social media sharing, since social media isn't a big part of your vision and doesn't lend itself to the KPI. Having the vision up all the time, that's another big thing, and you'll see the pictures when I put them up. As we're going through, I don't use any sort of like electronics. It's all just pen, paper, whiteboards, whatever it is. Writing it out, it just helps me, but it's a bigger commitment to write something on paper than type it out and be able to delete it. And when you're in a discovery room, it's full of Post-its and papers and markers. And we get everyone involved. As soon as you write it, it's a commitment rather than putting it up on a screen. And so I'll write out the vision. It might get edited. People will cross things out, but then we'll circle it and say, that's our vision. It's on the board for days while we're going through discovery. And anytime I sense the conversation's kind of wavering, I just kind of point, bring everyone back to the vision. And the vision has to be shared not just by the people in the room, but internally as well. So if I don't agree with it, I voice my concerns, because I'm going to have to represent the client to our development team. And if I waver on this vision, it's not going to lend itself to a good transition. And then our development team obviously has to understand it too, because they're quite autonomous. I don't ever want to be a bottleneck for projects, so I make sure they know as much as I know, so they can make quick decisions. Of course, if there's ever a point where they don't know, I'm always available. But it's really useful for the dev team to be on board with the vision when they're in a situation of, well, I can enhance this thing, because everyone wants to build the best thing, but I can do this cool enhancement. Is that going to help with this KPI? Probably not. Never mind. Maybe I'll put it in the backlog. Maybe I'll bring it up at the next scrum. So this is a sample vision. So one strategy I have, instead of writing out a sentence, I just ask for adjectives, ask for certain keywords that describes what their goal is for a project. So I just start point form, and everyone just throws words out. I don't filter it in any way. Just start writing them. And then once everyone's kind of got it out of their system, I go through a round of prioritizing. And it's hard to see, but there's underlines. And I say, okay, we have 5 things we can underline max. What are the 5 main takeaways from this? And that's where you start to filter things out. So you can see it started with inspire and engage, but then at the end of the day, well, those aren't really going to help with our KPIs. So if we have to pick 5, okay, we sell things related to this. We want to be in everything to everyone, user focused so that there's no barriers. We want to communicate that we're the best at what we do. And that's kind of contextual. In most cases, that's not a tangible thing, and we even define it here. What does actually best mean? So we get into tangible things. But we whittle it down to this so that when someone says, what about social media? I go here, yeah, it's on there, it's secondary, but let's not spend too much time on it in these discovery sessions. And then you won't see it in the Post-its, but we go through and we actually make it a concise sentence that I can spit out basically on cue to our dev team, to them in any meeting. So next thing we have this vision. Then we have to think, okay, well, how are we going to achieve this vision? Who does it affect? Who are the people who can help us achieve this vision? So we have to list all the different user groups, and usually I end up with like a dozen different user groups, and they'll range from things like our publishers, our shoppers, the president of the organization. They'll list everyone out who's important to this project. And then I'm always asking, are they related to this vision? Is this person actually helping you make money that we've identified you need to make? No, I guess not. We can teach our publisher how to do this thing. They're still important, but the whole goal of this is to prioritize, because we can't build everything. We can't make everything amazing for everyone. So let's at least make sure the things we do build are bringing business value. So we go through and we say, how does this person contribute to business value? I guess they kind of don't. Our social media manager, maybe they're not as important on here as we thought. And then we go through and prioritize. So prioritization is super important because it's going to lend itself to features. So right now we've identified, okay, what is the vision of the project? What does it actually need to achieve and do? Who are the people who are going to be part of this vision? So shoppers, potential shoppers, recurring shoppers, whatever it is. We'll go through it and list them out. And then the next thing we do, sample for users. So again, I just go through, make a list. So we have learners, they're broken down into 3 categories: teachers, new and old, parents. And you can see here, I've started to ask, well, how are they even helping with these KPIs? So as you can see down here, okay, there's not that much, but up there, all those things listed are the ways they make money. So certifications, books, things like that. It's really faint, but I even went through and tagged it on the paper of, okay, what's your number one moneymaker? What's your number two and number three? So that when we go to the dev team and have to say, where do we start? Well, let's start with the first moneymaker. Why leave that for the end? Why risk it? And I'll get into kind of the sprint cycle at the very end, because it's very much related to identifying these key features. So we go through, write out all the things that make the money for those people, and the majority are in that one group, so we know this project is really geared towards students. Here we call them learners, just because students kind of implies youth, but learners, it's any age for this site. So list them out, any sub-users, list how they connect to the vision or business value, which is what you see on the right. Tag business value with priority. You can't see it, it's super faint, but it basically says 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. And then here, you'll see different features listed. What I'm going through is pretty sequential, but no conversations that way. So what I try to do is keep up, and I don't only have one piece of paper. Like if it was this room, I'd probably divide the blackboard behind me, and if they mention a feature, I'll run over to the feature section, write it out. If they mention a user, I'll write it out over here, so that nothing is missed, but at least it's organized. Conversations are pretty organic, and I said I try to guide it with the vision when it's getting off the rails. I try to guide it with the agenda, but I never stop people from making a point. Just because we're not talking about features and I'm talking about users, it's probably important that they're mentioning it, so I'll run over, write it, and then move back to users. And that's why you see something like this on a list of users. Although it's not directly related, it's all things I want to capture. So I'm more of a reporter at this session. Okay, so now we have users. Now we have to define, okay, what are the problems they have to being able to do these things we want them to do? Like, so if they can't buy a book, why can't they buy a book? If they have trouble registering, why can't they? What are some of their problems we're trying to solve? And how does it affect them? So they can't register for a course. They can't buy the book we want. It's difficult for them to even know what benefit we provide them if they register for a course. So we go through and write out all these problems. And the key here for me is not to get technical, because it'll just bias the solution. If we start going, well, it's a problem that we don't have a content type for news. Well, that's not a problem that's for the user. That's a problem for you as a publisher. But what do they actually need from your product or your website that we can't provide them? So this is kind of a sample problem wall. These lines you can ignore. It's for music sheets, but it was the only whiteboard we had there. So we go through, and I'm just listing problems, and then I try to tag them with users. It's very organic, but you go around, list all the problems. So improve yourself through music, be a better person. So you can see it's pretty general, but then we get specific, like silo of services and resources. So if I'm registering for a course, we also have a bookstore, but the person buying a course never knows we have a bookstore. We have these silos. We want to create this flow of like, buy all our things, and we can't do that right now. And then my technical mind is kind of working right now to think, okay, I can see how we can make this work, but I don't tell them at this point. But I can see how, okay, there are technical solutions to these problems. We identify things further, like alumni is a group. Okay, well, who are alumni? That's a big group, so teachers, learners, performers. We get into problems that aren't even related to the project. So you have a lot of, this is for a music project, you have a lot of young musicians. Why do they leave music? It's solitary, it's not a team sport generally. So how do we keep them in music? It's continued learning. It's a long-term commitment to become a master at your instrument. And then accomplishment. How do you even have a sense of accomplishment? Yes, there's certifications, but nobody likes taking tests. So how do we convey a sense of accomplishment? So this is the part where it comes back to understanding their business. Sometimes it may feel a bit, at least in my case, feels a little bit fake. Like, why am I even talking about this? We're supposed to build a website. And sometimes I sense maybe they feel that as well. But this information I've seen come back and help us tenfold. When it comes down to building a feature, and they request A, B, and C, and you could point to this and say, well, who is it helping here? Especially when you're trying to control scope, and they want to build all these amazing things, and we want to build amazing things too. But I'm responsible for the success of the project. I have to know these things. And when we enter a project, the service I'm trying to provide is just that, making business success or bringing business value. And this is the only way you can do it, is to really understand their business. So you go through and you say something like a teacher, they're registering their students, but we identified a problem that students never interact with the organization. Teachers are always registering them directly. Teachers never even know about them. That's a problem. How do we connect the students to this organization? So from here, we get some problems listed out. And then from here, we can build features now. And features, there's a few different key ways we can start. They already have things in mind. They already have things they have on their current site they like, things they don't like, things they've wanted, that they say, we want this, we want that, and so on. So like everything we do, we go through and we list all the features out. And I asked the question of, how does this feature solve any of those problems? And one of two things will happen. It doesn't. Okay, we'll leave it here, the lower priority. Or it solves a problem we haven't talked about. Perfect. Now it's on the board. So once we have all the features listed, then we prioritize them. And this is what results in what we build first, and setting up the sprint schedule and project schedule. Once you have the priority with the client involved, so I'm not making decisions on their behalf. I can make recommendations, of course. Generally, half business value, but half technical, like we can't really build your front page fully until we build the news that's being pulled to it. So maybe we'll bump news and then front page. There's dependencies like that. There's migration reasons for prioritizing, but it's a joint effort. I'll have my input, they'll have theirs. And then identifying dependencies, as I said, per feature, so that when we go back and build, I can proactively say, this thing we're doing in Sprint 3, I know we need to get their IT department involved, let's get them involved now. So when we start Sprint 3, we already have everything we need. So this is what a typical feature list looks like. So you just write them out. It's starting to get technical here. Some of it is my phrasing. I'll hear them say something because no client knows what contextual filters are. They have no idea what that means, but I'll hear things. And I write contextual filters, so now because this is the part that my dev team is going to see. Generally, this is what we're going to work off of. So I start to introduce words, and I introduce it for the client's sake too, because that's what they're going to hear back when we start to present. We take different ways. When I get to presentations, I'll explain a bit more. But when we present, we do it, here's what general public sees. And then when there's publishers or IT people in the room, here's the Drupal lingo that you should know for this feature, because you're going to be maintaining this or whatever it may be. So we list them all out. Sometimes a contract is a good guide. It'll be detailed. I don't really like when it's detailed because I have to do that thing of like, you're not getting this, confirm please. It's like an administrative thing. And when I say you're not getting this, it's not because it's my decision. It's because we've gone through and we've agreed you don't actually need these things. But I like just getting a bucket of time to build something. A lot of people don't sign a contract for a bucket of time. A lot of people want to see tangible things like, no, this is a line item. We want this deliverable, that deliverable, which is fair, but this process lets you amend that. So we've listed them all out, and then I've done a few things. It's faint, but these are post-its, the 1, 2, 3. Prioritization again, I give them post-its, go place them by your priorities. And then I sit back and let a little bit of arguments happen as they move things around. And then after a little while, it settles, and then here are our priorities, we all agree. And then these M's are anything that have migration tied to it. Whether it's automated or not, it doesn't matter. But we know content is a factor for these, so we have to figure it out sooner than later. The typical way we work for migration is we work in something called vertical slices, where traditionally, and what I did as a tech lead is build all the back end first, then build all the front end. And the client would have to wait till the very end to see what news looks like, to see what events looks like, back end, front end, all styled. And then you have 2 weeks to migrate, or you can't launch. Or you would do that, and front end and back end would never line up perfectly. Or the designer designed something that's not part of the site build. Now you have to go back and build these fields in, or whatever it is. Having it phased was not good for us as development, was not good for the client. So what we do is vertical. So something like course catalog, we'll do the site building, the design, the theming, all in one sprint. And it's a collaborative effort, and that's why designers have to be involved, UX has to be involved, devs. We'll define what course catalog is. We'll define the UX, define the design. In one sprint, build it front and back. So when we deliver in 2 weeks, they can start entering content, they can see front end, back end, and they sign off on it. We never have to think about course catalog again. So we do vertical slices, and that's why prioritization is important, because we commit one or many of these things to a sprint. And vertical slices is a really interesting switch, and a colleague was supposed to give a talk about it. Unfortunately, he couldn't come, but I highly recommend you look into vertical slices. It kind of blew my mind when I first heard about it, and I thought, why did we never do this? But it allows them to migrate 2 weeks in rather than 4 months in. And they migrate in phases. So news is done, migrate news. You have 2 weeks. Events are done, migrate events. It's a much easier undertaking than here's a whole site, migrate it all, test it all, whatever it may be. So we've identified what has migration. the priorities for features to be built, and then we've even identified phase 2. So we've gone through all this conversation. We realize now, okay, these 2 things, while they're important, they're not going to be in the scope of this. They can wait till phase 2. We have a finite amount of time and budget that we can spend on this project. And when the client realizes something is phase 2, my job is easy. I don't have to go in there and go, I think we're going to have to wait for these things. So the whole point of this is visibility and empowering them to be able to make the decisions early, so I don't have to make it. Okay, so we've done all this work. We have just a mountain of information. How do I take this and actually start building something a few weeks later? So there's a few things I do. I create, and these are just my personal tools, maybe a starting point, something called an allocations document, which sounds really boring, but to me it's exciting because all the client wants to know from this point on, great, we've spent 3 days together, you know everything about us, start building. But for me to start building, I have to start making decisions of how much time are we spending on this thing, how much time are we spending on that thing, and how do I even know how much time to spend on search versus events when I have a bucket of time. Even if I don't, I combine it anyway, and I have a bucket. So I create something like this. This is just a spreadsheet, but what I started to do is build out epics. So we use Jira, and it has epics. Build out epics for every feature. And this is not a full list after I leave Discovery. This is just what I know so far. And every 2 weeks, I'm going to learn about new things and then fit them in here. So what I do, I list them all. I have a percentage, always adds up to 100. So this is how much time we have. So I just assign a percentage to each feature to show this is how much time we're going to spend building on everything. And this is how I start to introduce constraints, both for our clients and our dev team. Even though I don't know everything I need to know about these things, I do have the sense of, well, basic page, because it's the first content type, the first thing we're theming, usually the first sprint is a big one. You have to build the header, the footer, even though it's not part of basic page, it's a big one. So 7%. It's arbitrary, the numbers, it's more of a ranking. Homepage, it's dynamic, it pulls from a lot of things, the front end is pretty involved, 10%. And I go through and assign numbers to everything. This is shared with the clients in real time. They can see it every day. And as I learn new things, I change the percentages or add more epics, and then I have to reallocate. So I have to take from somewhere and then put it in something else. And that's always communicated with the client. And they're able to say, no, we want 11% for funding. Take the time from events. And I go, that's perfect. I don't have to make the decision for you. The more I don't have to make those decisions, the better. And the way to be able to do that is to be transparent and create something that's easy for them to understand in terms of levels of effort. So I do this just based on intuition and everything I know about the client. Then, as I have here, I'll just go through it. Start with a features list, the same one I had on the whiteboard. This is a different client, that's why they don't line up. Allocate percentage to each. Add new features as I learn about them in conversation and regular refinements, whatever it may be. Update allocations as I learn, and involve the client. So they have access to this, they can see it anytime, and we review it, I would say minimum once a sprint, but usually a few more times a sprint. So let me go back to that guy. Okay, so I've built it. It's prioritized in order, so from the 1, 2, 3s, and then everything else I make assumptions. Assumptions more based on things they didn't talk about as much, so okay, I'm putting it more to the bottom of the list. Assumptions on, if we don't actually build this and we run out of time and money, can they still be successful? Yeah, without these 3 things, they can still be successful. I move it to the bottom just in case scope grows, timeline stops, whatever it may be. Then what I do is I build stories and acceptance criteria. So these are things coming from the Agile framework. All a story is the user problems we talked about, I write them out. So as a learner, I need to be able to register for courses so I can further my education. So it's the same thing, it's just written out. And then I write an acceptance criteria, again, very high level of what I would need to sign up on this thing. So it can be high level, like, okay, it has to be easy to use. I want minimal clicks. I only want to enter my name and email. It gets more and more specific. And then this is a joint effort with the client, and they can actually jump in and say, oh no, we also wanted to do this, and we wanted to do that, which is perfect. Then we have a vision of this one feature. So this registration, we have what problem it's solving. We have the acceptance criteria in terms of what a learner or a student has to be able to do. But it starts to get specific, where I only want to enter my name and email, That's the dev. When they look at this thing, they're going to see, okay, I need to have those fields. So if you've noticed, we've transitioned from really high level, and with stories, we're starting to get to the level where dev can look at this and start building. So I built, this should say for each epic, not each story, but I built stories for each epic with their acceptance criteria. Then I do a discovery with our dev team. There's a few things. If you can afford it, I would involve the dev team in every step along the way. Obviously, having 6 people in a room and charging the clients doesn't really go well, especially when you're in charge of budget and you're like, that's a lot of budget, just have people sit there. But on the other hand, you're going to spend the time explaining, and the more separation between a client and the person doing, the more chance there is for misinterpretation or assumptions. There's always going to be a balance. We've included our dev team in one project. We had a bit more breathing room. We included them in everything. In this project, it's a hybrid. So in refinements that are per sprint, I involve devs. These kind of discovery sessions for 3 days, it's a big pill to swallow, billing-wise. But the more you involve them, the easier the transition is. So then what I do with the dev team is go through each feature, all the documents I showed you earlier, I walk them through it, show them everything I know. I use Confluence to track everything. So they have access to all the Confluence. It's just like a wiki or a repository where you can take meeting notes. And anything we build, I can link back to that sentence in the discovery that led me to build this thing. It's great for our devs. It's great for me. I can't remember everything. It's great for the clients when they say, why did you build this thing? It rarely happens, but if they do, well, this is the discussion we had in this discovery session, and just connects the dots. So we have the story. We have the acceptance criteria, which is a bit more tangible, but to actually start building, the dev team starts building tasks. And these are now the technical requirements doc, but for specific features. So we need a content type with these fields. This field has to be a drop-down list. So it gets nitty-gritty. It's all the things I want to know. So what am I actually building here? Let's figure it out together. Traditionally, as a technical lead, I was the one who would say, this is what you have to build and how you have to build it. It was still collaborative in a way, because I'd say, well, but if you have ideas, let me know. Most people would go, no, that looks fine. You know, they don't know everything I know, so if they're just looking at a spreadsheet, it's going to be hard for them to contribute. But in this case, I sit back as a PO now, and they just start putting together, okay, well, we should probably build this content type, this view, that block, this thing. But I'm listening to make sure whatever they come up with is attached to the story and it's going to hit on those acceptance criteria. And that we're not overdoing it and not under-delivering. Just that sweet spot of, yeah, it's going to hit on all these points in the acceptance criteria. Yes, everything I know about their kind of technical expertise, yes, these are all good things. But I try not to anyway jump in and say, no, that should be a view. It's hard to forget your past positions when you transition in terms of being a tech lead and having decision-making for technical things. That's probably the most challenging part of my role, is giving that up. But it is liberating as well to let 5 people come up with a plan rather than just me and the technical things I know. And our team is it ranges from junior devs to senior devs, and everyone is at the table. And the junior devs for me are highly valuable in the sense that they may not automatically go to, well, that's going to be a custom module. They may solve the problem a different way, where, oh, we don't have to write any custom code. You're right. Why did I even think of that? Well, usually as a senior dev, your brain is already working a certain way, junior devs a certain way, and it's a really great balance. So they build out tasks for, let's call it search. So I have to integrate Solr, build an index, build the view for the results. It's got to return these things because we said in our acceptance criteria the search result has to have titles, dates, a blurb, whatever it is. And then once they're done and they go, okay, this is everything we need to build for this one thing, we estimate as a team. So everyone, we go around, we have cards, and we say, okay, for this one task, how long will it take? Everyone puts out a number. You may have done this in the past, but it's planning poker. Someone may say 2 hours, some person says 5. We have a conversation. Are we missing something? Are you overcomplicating it? We have the conversation to make sure technically we have covered what we know. It's all guesses, but it's an exercise to make sure the conversation is comprehensive. So everything is estimated for search. We add it up, and it'll say something like 45 hours. I look at my spreadsheet. I don't have the column for hours, and I say we have 35 hours, not 45 to do this thing. Then it's a conversation with the client. They can see everything we've done, all our estimations, and for them it's like shopping, where I'm like, here's the price for everything in terms of time. What would you like to buy? That can add up to 35, or you could take $10 from something else in the spreadsheet. So I don't have to make those decisions. I definitely make recommendations. They look to us for recommendations, but before we even start, we are already in a good place to not go over budget or under deliver or surprise the client. So you can see from all this, this is quite a process. But we get into the swing of things in sprints. In terms of, we do this initial discovery, I create the spreadsheet, we take the first story basic page, we refine it further with the client of, okay, what is basic page, what does it mean to the different users, their acceptance criteria. With the technical team, we break it down into tasks. If we need clarification from the client, that's our opportunity. We estimate it, so I can go back and say, yes, it's within our 7%. Now we can go and build it that sprint. While that's being built, I'm working on the next maybe 2 or 3 things with them. And then it's just a cycle. Every week, I talk to the client about the next few things, build the stories, the acceptance criteria. The team estimates and builds the tasks for each item. And then next sprint, we do those things. And it's a nice cycle. And we always do it. We always hit things in the middle of the sprint. There are always guesses of how we're going to build it. There are always guesses how long things take. This is where it gets a bit difficult to judge when do I stop the work to go back to tell the client there's a chance we're going over, and when are we going to even out. You're not going to be right all the time, and the challenge I have is balancing momentum versus making sure the client has all the information they need to make decisions. So if it's halfway through a sprint and I know we were going to do maps one way, it's not working, I'll go back to the client and say, this is what's happened, how important are maps to you? Very important. Okay, we've estimated the second way to do it is this. Can we continue? Go for it. It does stop the work, but this is where I have to put my business value hat on. It's not my money. I can't make decisions like that. I can empower them to make decisions, but we have to be transparent. And part of it is kind of teaching our dev team not to be heroes. A lot of people want to be heroes. I want to be a hero when I put this up, and yeah, we can deliver everything. It's just in us to build everything. But it's very unrealistic to be a hero in every sprint. And it's a hard thing for devs to swallow and flag to me that this thing, I can't actually do it. And most people kind of try to keep it under wraps, like, no, I just need 2 more hours, and that turns into 12 hours that we've spent extra on something. And that's not something I tend to get upset about in terms of like, why did you go over? But it's more something where I try to come up with systems to flag it without micromanaging. And part of it is instilling in a team. We don't need heroes on the team. We succeed as a team and we fail as a team, and it sounds like such a cliche from some Disney football movie, but it's the truth. When the way we work, we all sit next to each other. There isn't one person responsible for building basic page. We all are. So if you're stuck on something, we're all stuck on it. And between us, we all have the knowledge to fix it, and I'm a great tool for the team to go back to the client to say, yeah, we can do it, no, we can't, so let's use the tools we have. When we get to the end of the sprint and we don't have a map, we can't be like, well, it was Bill's fault. You can't be mad at Open. It was just Bill. He spent too much time. It's Open's fault. So in terms of succeeding as family, as a team, that's where it comes in. And then, yeah, as I said, this is a living document. So every sprint we go through, I get to validate. Did we spend 7%? Did we go over, under? When I start a project, we tend to go over. And then halfway through the project, or maybe a quarter, it levels out. Because, as you know, in development, everything kind of trickles. Even with theming, you build one component, it takes long. The next component will inherit things and continue. So generally, that's how it goes. But this is something I'm on pretty much every day or every other day, depending on how tight timelines and budgets are. And this is really my way of having visibility of how we're doing, the health of the project, and likewise for the clients. So to recap, a really high 10,000 feet view. Before I start a project, I do a lot of research and create a structured agenda. The agenda changes based on the client in a sense. Like if we're not responsible for design, that's not going to be part of my agenda, but I still ask the questions of who's doing it, can we involve them? What we do with this client here, in our daily scrums, we have our client and the design firm in there every day. There's so much going on that the telephone game doesn't really work. We use Basecamp, there's a lot of noise. So we just start our day, we have our dev team, the design studio, and our clients in the scrum. We include the design studio in our refinements too every week when we talk about the next thing we're building, so they hear the same things, they're able to ask questions. And we don't have to be a bad guy in terms of telling them the design company made this beautiful thing and I have to go, well, we can't even build that, that's technically impossible, this is a Photoshop file. But having them involved in the process, it's much easier to point those things out. And the design company is great in the sense of like, okay, well, good. We don't want this project to fail either, and we don't want to put you in that position. The client gets to hear it. It only brings value to do that. And I check in with our clients on these things. I check in and say, hey, do you find it valuable being in our scrums? Because if you don't have to attend. I don't want to waste your time. And they ask me the same thing. Do you find it valuable? And I say, so far, yes. But if it stops being valuable, we'll let you know. So just being malleable in the process definitely helps, and reacting to it. So then, in terms of discovery, definitely have key takeaways you need to leave the room, and advertise this beforehand in your agenda and when you start the discovery of saying, when we leave in 2 days, these are the things I need. So it's made absolutely clear that if I have to structure the conversation back or cut someone off, that it's because of these goals. It's not because I don't want to hear from you, but these are the things I need to start. And then from there, build the tangibles through stories and acceptance criteria, and be as explicit as you can be in the acceptance criteria, even if it seems like it's a given. Like saying it needs to be a select list. Before, in my spreadsheets, I'd never say that. And then we train the client on how to enter content, and they say, oh, this is too difficult. Can it be a select list? I'm like, I should have asked that. So I make it as explicit as I can be. Sometimes acceptance criteria is like 30 items. I may split it because that's a lot to digest, but it can be 30 items. There's no real rules to it. We want to capture everything we need to know about search, for example. The biggest thing I found that can hurt a project is assumptions. And a lot of it comes down to feeling like, this is all personal again, but feeling like you may be annoying the client by asking too many questions, by asking them to clarify. What do you mean? It's just search. Just build a search. We just want to search. And I tell them in discovery, you may get annoyed by me, but I don't want to make assumptions. And I find everyone can respect that. Saying, I don't want to make assumptions and build the wrong thing. Yeah, you're right. You probably shouldn't waste our money. So saying that definitely helps. And then I want to kind of leave you with a few tools I used when I transitioned over. There's some books on here, again, kind of cliche, that I went into. Lean UX is a great one for going through the discovery phase and asking the right questions. This is tiny. I'll explain what that is in a second. But Lean UX, if you haven't read it, it's a quick read, like an afternoon read. It's really valuable. Highlight a few lines. Change by design is a really good one, even if you're not a designer. It kind of teaches you to think in a way of problem solving rather than building technical things. It can get a bit verbose and go into design and get a little artsy, but there's really good stuff to pull out of there in terms of, even if you're not a designer, if you build anything, you're building things to solve problems, and that's the book for it. And then Phoenix Project is a really interesting one. It's fictional, but and it gave me really high anxiety reading it, but it's about a project manager, in a sense, at a technical company building something that blows up. And it's funny it's called Phoenix because what was going on, it was a lot like the Phoenix payroll thing, where he's telling his boss, we can't launch this thing. They say, we have to launch, and then it blows up, and you get to go through it with him, be anxious, be like, why haven't you quit already? And then there's some good news and happy things that come out of it, but you kind of learn about process through this book, in terms of they have this problem, and they're like, okay, well, we have all these things to build. How do we even start? And then it'll say, prioritize. And I'm like, oh, I see what you're doing. You're teaching me. But it's fictional, and it's really easy to read. In terms of tools, I use the question repository, which is this thing here. Basically, everything I've read, whether it's blog posts, books, whatever, I highlight, and then I just put together and grouped it. You can't see it, but I'll read it out. The different questions I can ask to get the things I need. So like a vision, here's a few questions I can use to prod. And what I do is, the only piece of technology I have is really an iPad that I don't like write on. It just has my questions. I can scroll. It's just too much paper to print. But I walk around with the iPad, and when I'm listening, then I look down and see, okay, we're talking about vision. Let me ask this question. And if I don't get what I need, okay, I'm going to ask this one. And it just helps me because I don't have to memorize the questions. And then the next one is on personas or users. So who is this for? How do we know that it's for them? And this is where you get the KPIs and things. So it's just prodding questions, question frameworks, just a quick note I wrote myself. And then, as I said, I use a lot of Post-its and whiteboards and stickers. When I went through Agile training, that's how we did it, and I saw the value right away. And I never wrote anything down, even through university. I always had a laptop, and now I'm back to pen and paper. It just seems to work better for this kind of brainstorming. And then last thing is just knowing a bunch of different prioritization games. One I played recently was for the WYSIWYG, the CK editor. They wanted all these features. So we listed out all the features for the CK editor. I went back to the team and I said, on a scale of 1 to 5, how complicated are these to build? And they assigned them scores. And I took that back to the client and said, okay, you have 10 points to spend. This is 20 points. So they went through and they picked out of that 10 points. It was arbitrary, but I had to cut it in half. And then they even amended, like, okay, if we combine these two and do it this way, how many points is that? And I'm like, not like selling a mattress, but okay, let's say 3 points. But you go through this process, and it gives context to how difficult something is. And I make them make the decisions. I guide them. And if I hear something and I can see, okay, you know what, we can do Lightbox this way and that way if we do it, and that's only 2 points. So it's definitely collaborative, but the key is having them be empowered to make those decisions. And to wrap up, a few shameless plugs. So at Open, we have free Drupal training. We do it quite often, at least once a month, I think, ranging from fundamentals, modules, and theming. We have a booth over there that you can go to. And we just released a really cool module that came out of a recent Drupal 8 project that was enterprise level. So it's a global intranet for 100,000 people. And we had a challenge of synchronizing content. And content can be anything, users, taxonomies, and so on. They have external systems feeding taxonomy trees that are 10,000 terms. So they're feeding it into Drupal. So we created a module for that project, and we have a few stable releases. It's called content synchronization, and you can import anything into Drupal 8, and it's all done through YAML. Questions? Thank you, and then questions. Are there any tech leads in the room, or anyone in that role where you're like architecting? A few people, okay. Any of the challenges I mentioned, is this something you face, like having to do upfront?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
All right, I'm not alone. Good.
I have a lot of experience
With like upfront
projects.
Yeah. And how do you guys have like an Agile framework? Do you guys do like Kanban, Scrum, anything like that?
Jira, yeah.
Okay, and you have your boards with the tasks and
Yeah.
all that stuff. Yeah. Okay. And how do you find that process?
Kind of messy,
Yeah.
sketchy.
Yeah.
Yeah, we try to improve every day.
One thing, it's kind of not related, but because Jira came up, we did as well for QA, is we have like the QA column. So when you drag something from I've done working on it, it goes into QA. Every day, one person on the team is a QA person. So that day they put on their hat of breaking everything, and that way it's a shared responsibility between the team. And you kind of feel, we don't feel like the QA person is an external and a bad person. It's someone on the team. And it really helps the whole team improve, because if I see my coworkers doing something wrong every time, we can do that. But I agree, it gets quite messy. When you see 20 things being worked on, you're like, well, I don't know what's happening with each one.
I think it's also important the previous process, like break down all those epics, stories,
Yeah.
and everything.
Yeah.
I think it's quite amazing.
Yeah, the more work you kind of put into Jira, the better it does for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, in terms of breaking down.
Jira is just a tool.
That's it. It is. Was anyone familiar with the product owner role before this talk? Yeah, a few people. Any in your organizations? Yeah. And are you in the role or someone else?
No, someone else.
Okay. From what you know about their role, is it any sense like similar to what I talked about? I'm always interested in how everyone does the role.
Well, I'm the Scrum Master for.
Oh, okay, cool.
So I work with the product owner
Yeah.
to kind of break things out into like these tasks.
Right.
But yeah, he didn't necessarily do it. He's more like talking to clients and figuring out
Yeah.
what are the main features that are needed at the moment, and then prioritize them.
Yeah.
And then what we should do.
Perfect. All right. So I'm still doing something similar.
Yeah,
Good.
that's good.
All right. So I'll wrap up. I'm 2 minutes over. Thank you, everyone. Oh, sorry. There's a question.
Just any advice on KPIs for when it's a client that isn't dollars at the end? That's one of been the big problems I've had. Like what are the questions you ask to draw
Yeah.
that out of people, and how do you do it?
Yeah, for KPIs, basically it's what do you need to increase, because it could be anything. If it's a library, more members. If it's a membership-based thing. If it's not exactly dollars, it's tied to something they need to increase. So what are you hoping this product or this site increases for you or decreases? Sometimes it might be an internal system. We want less phone calls, people complaining to us. So it's just trying to find anything you can quantify with numbers.
So we use Moscow to prioritize our tasks, and that seems to really work for us when we're talking to clients, so that they can validate what is the most important, and we're all on the same page of what that actually means. And it basically means that there might be a legal thing or